been officially 48 hours since I started using the Flip 3, so now felt like the perfect time to pause and make this video to tell you guys what I like about it so far and what I don't like about it so far ahead of the big full review. So let's do it, and it all starts with the build. I'm a really big fan of the build improvements that Samsung has made from the Flip 2 to the Flip 3. I think that it looks super premium and simple. It's really thin, and it's also more narrow than a lot of other smartphones and taller as well, which is actually where my first issue comes into play here. The buttons are higher on this phone than on most traditional smartphones. I have like pretty average sized hands, I think, and I definitely struggle to hit the power button, which is also the fingerprint sensor. I think that they probably couldn't make it any lower because it would compromise the integrity of the hinge, or it would have to be like really low below the hinge. So I think that this placement for the power button is the best that they could probably do, but I feel like if they move the volume rockers over to the left side, then that would definitely improve the volume situation. That said, right now there is an antenna window in the exact spot that I put the volume rockers, so they would have to move that obviously if they took my advice. And I'm so stoked to see that there's a window for 5G now, because this phone has millimeter wave 5G support, which is great to see. The phone also has much better speakers now, and the hinge and the display have gotten some major upgrades. So starting with the hinge, this phone now has IPX8 water resistance. That's a pretty big deal actually. Like that's a pretty big durability improvement, and it also is a pretty big ease of mind improvement. Like as a consumer, knowing that your phone is water resistant is pretty huge. And the way that Samsung achieved this is by sealing the internals off on the inside, which means that they did not get the rating for dust. So this is not dust resistant. It still has the sweepers in the hinge to try to mitigate dust getting in, but it is not ideal, and that's definitely something that you have to consider with foldable phones. I feel like one day when we actually do have dust resistance on foldable phones, it's gonna really level it up, but for now, water resistance is a good first step. The display is also 80% more durable, and Samsung actually switched the plastic that they're using on like the protective built-in do not take it off screen protector, and it feels better. It has a much harder feeling to the touch. So in the past, I feel like the Fold and Flip have both had kind of like mushy displays where it feels like a cheap screen protector. This feels a lot more like traditional glass, like it's harder and the texture feels better, so that's great to see. The crease is definitely still there, and you can see it and you can definitely feel it, and because it's in the center of the display, you kind of run your hand over it all the time when you're scrolling. It's one of those things that foldable phones just have right now, and I think we're gonna have it for a while because display tech is not there yet to get rid of the crease completely, because the phone needs to obviously be able to bend. Another thing I've noticed over the last 48 hours using this phone is the major enhancements to the display in terms of brightness, but also refresh rate. So it's an 120 hertz refresh rate display now, which is great. I'm a pretty big fan of high refresh rate, so I definitely notice it. And even if you don't notice it consciously, I think subconsciously it just makes the phone feel faster. And the brightness is also better, but that leaves a major question mark of what the battery life is going to be like. So far, it seems average to me, but I definitely have not used it enough in a normal use to give you that. Like, I'll give you my thoughts on that in the full review, but right now, the 2 days that I've spent with this phone have been the setup day and then a ton of shooting of the phone, so it's not really a realistic battery test, but I'm definitely a little concerned about that because the phone does not have a huge battery capacity, and it is a pretty big display, a bright display, and a high refresh rate display. Speaking of displays, the cover display is now 1.9 inches, so it's not the huge Motorola Razr type display, but this is really good to check the time, see notifications quickly, set an alarm, or see your schedule briefly. And it also has some really interesting ways to customize the wallpaper, like there's a really cute one with animals that change all the time, which I'm a big fan of. And then you can also use it as a viewfinder when you're trying to take selfies with the back camera, which is also a nice perk. I think the fact that this is a flip phone means that I'm much more intentional with when I'm using it. Like with a typical candy bar style phone, I just turn it on and I can start mindlessly scrolling. With this, I have to unfold it in order to get started. And just that little bit of resistance means that when I'm picking up the phone, I'm normally picking it up with something in mind. Like, oh, I'm gonna respond to that email, or I'm gonna take a picture. Maybe that's just me and my lack of self-control that I need that, but that's something that I have noticed over the last 48 hours. But I feel like the biggest headline with this phone is the price. It's $999 now, which is a pretty significant price drop from last year, and also pretty significantly different than the Fold 3, which is $1799, Samsung's other foldable. And while that's still really expensive at $999, it's more in line with Samsung's other flagships and then also other ultra premium phones on the market. And I think that this speaks to the fact that foldable tech could become more mainstream and how much of an advantage Samsung has over the other major players in tech like Apple or Google that haven't even put their foot in foldable technology yet in a meaningful way. Samsung being able to create something like this at this price is really exciting. It's not without its compromises, obviously durability being a huge one. When you're setting up the phone, there still is a message saying that you have to be careful with the display. You still obviously can feel the crease. You still don't have dust resistance. screens. Those are some pretty major compromises. So as a consumer, you really have to want this technology in order to make it work. But I think that even if you don't buy this phone is crucial to foldable tech becoming more mainstream and pushing the price point lower and lower. That said, there's so much more that I still need to test before that full review, so I'm gonna be putting my hours in with it, so definitely stay tuned and be sure to subscribe if you wanna see that. I also just made a video on the Fold 3, which is like the older brother to the Flip 3, so if you wanna check that out, you can click right here. Thanks so much for watching this one, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye.